Hello everyone, and welcome to our second ever core tutorial here on YouTube. I want to start off this tutorial by saying a few things here. Along with this YouTube video, there is also a forum post here on the core forums that you can go through and follow step by step everything that we're about to do. So as we're going through this video, I'm actually going to follow through with my own tutorial here. I know some people like to learn via video, some people like reading through for themselves, so no matter what you're looking for, hopefully you can figure out exactly what you want and you will be able to make some amazing skyboxes for all of your games on core. Now, in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you guys how to make a skybox for your games completely from scratch. We're not going to use any pre-made skies, any pre-made assets, nothing like that. This is all going to be completely from scratch. That way you guys 110% understand how these skyboxes work, and you'll be able to make any skybox that you want for any of your games going forward. So first thing we're going to do is jump into the Create tab here on Core, and we're going to create a new empty project. We will just name this Skybox YouTube Tutorial, and we're going to create a new project. Now, depending on if this is your first time opening Core or not, your windows and everything might look a little bit different here. But you have your hierarchy over here on the right side. I just want to talk about a few things that I'm going to be referencing a lot during this tutorial, or that are referenced a lot in the forum post. So the hierarchy is right here. Your custom properties window is this guy right here. Community content, core content, and project content are all down here. We're going to be in community content and mostly core content. And then of course you have your viewing window here in the center. I want to make sure that our community content tab and our core content tab are under me on the camera. That way you guys can see all of it while I'm talking to you. But first thing we want to do is navigate over here to community content, and we're going to download a few things here that I have published to the public. Help make it easier for you guys. The first thing is this Skyboxes pack right here. There's 11 pre-made skies in here that I made basically using the same process that I'm about to walk you guys through right now. So pretty simple stuff. You just drag and drop them right into your hierarchy and they work. The next thing that we're going to grab is this color cube sampler. Now, to find this stuff on CC, you can simply search my name, or you can look for the title, like this one is Doc's Color Cube Sampler. And this cube here, we're going to import this. If you've never imported anything from community content, all you have to do is click and drag whatever the item is right into your hierarchy. And boom, it should pop up straight in the middle of your scene here. I'm going to lift it up so we can see those colors on the bottom of the cube. But this cube here is just a simple color cube that helps you navigate as we are building skyboxes, or if you're lighting a scene inside, you can pop this cube inside of your building, and as the lights change, as VFX change, post-processing change, all of those sort of things change, you can check back to this cube as a reference and see how the lighting affects different colors or different materials. So this is just a small little piece of CC that I actually published right before this YouTube video and right before this other community content, and hopefully it helps you guys out. Now, the last bit of community content that is here is this purple sunset skybox tutorial. This is I'm not going to import this because this is actually what we're going to be making today. Now, as far as creating a sky from complete scratch, of course we have to delete the sky that's already here, which is this default sky. If you open this tab up, you'll see it's made of 3 elements: sky dome, skylight, and sunlight, right? So we're going to delete that and your whole game will go black. You now have no light, you have no sky, you have nothing in the game. And you need to navigate over here to core content and scroll down to sky. Now, those 3 elements that I just named, you're going to be looking for those here in this viewport, and you're just going to click and drag those back into the hierarchy. So first thing that I like to do is to find the sky dome and drag this in, right? The sky dome is a giant inverted sphere that gives you sort of this picturesque mapped image onto the inside of that sphere. The next thing we're going to do is the sunlight, and then the last thing is the skylight right here. Click and drag all of those into your hierarchy. They're now right here, and we're going to jump into editing these. Now, really quick, I'm going to go ahead and close this core content, just sort of slide this down for now. That way we can see more of the properties and a little bit more of what we're actually editing here. But the first thing, you may have dragged these into your hierarchy in a different order. It doesn't really matter. The first thing we're going to mess with here or change is the sunlight. Now, the sunlight might be a little hard to see right now, and that's because by default when you drag a new sun into your hierarchy, it's way over here on the horizon. So the first thing you want to do is take this Y rotation and turn it to -25. That'll put your sun up straight up in the sky so you can at least see it. And again, from here you can change the Z rotation. Maybe you want it a little bit over here to the right, which is just behind the clouds. Maybe you want it to the left, or maybe you want to just keep it straight up in the sky. We're just going to keep it straight up for now. And again, you can change these numbers here, right? As they increase, the sun will move different directions across the sky. But the quicker way to do this is actually just to click and drag the sky, and it lets you see it moving in very smooth increments. So the whole time that we're moving here, these numbers don't need to be exact. If you want to follow them exactly, go ahead and check out the forum post. I've listed out all of the colors and the exact numbers that I used precisely in that forum post, but more or less we want our sky to be around -25 here. I'll put it at -28. That way it's a little bit behind these clouds, which we actually don't want. So we're gonna drop it right there, just so we can see the very edge of it and keep an eye on where that sun is, right? Now, the next thing we're gonna do is change the intensity and the light color here. I like to drop the intensity down just a touch, around 3, and then I like to change the light color to yellow. This is something that I always do because yellow light blends very well with every other color on the color wheel. One important thing to check is to make sure that this cast shadows box is ticked. If it's not, your sun that is up in the sky will not generate any shadows. Again, if you just check the cube here, it offers a great example of this shadow. I always have these cast shadows ticked on. I think it helps add a lot of depth to the world, and it ensures that you don't have to go through and add shadows via independent light sources later on. Now, the rest of these advanced properties, you can play with them. I recommend leaving them for now, as the sky dome is the biggest part of the edit that will let you get your sky looking how you want. But down here at the very bottom, under the advanced properties, the light shaft properties, and the shadows properties, is this sun disk property. You can turn the sun off, but I think it always makes sense to leave that draw sun in the air. I like to change the shape to soft and increase this size to a max of 10. Now, this sun might not be big enough for you. Generally in my games, I feel like this is not a big enough sun, so I actually generally start off with a size of 15 on the sun. To make it a little bit bigger, you could go up to 25 to 30, even to 45 to have a giant sun up in your sky. This is really a preference thing. For the convenience of staying on track with our forum tutorial, though, I am going to put it at 15. That gives us a decent sized sun that isn't too overpowering in the sky. Now, as we look at our sky, the next thing we're going to change here is we're going to move from sunlight to skylight. Now, this skylight is what casts light straight down from the sky, from the whole environment, down onto your map. The sunlight, think of that as the directional light from the sun that's way off in space somewhere, right? So without skylight, this is how pretty much all games look. Very gray, very dull, and the only color you will see is where the sunlight is hitting. Now, This is a very realistic look for a game. If you wanted to build a real feeling world with real shadows, this is actually how you would want to do it. When you're in the shadow of items, it would be very, very dark. Now, you would still get some ambient light around here, which is generally where this skylight comes into play. But again, if you want a very dark game or you want to set the mood, you might want to leave this skylight off. Now, with the skylight selected, I always like to change the tint color. It's the only thing on here that I like to change. Some of these other properties are very complex. You can do some really cool stuff with them, but I don't recommend playing around with them at all until you edit the sky dome and get the sky dome looking how you want it. Again, I change this tint color. I generally change it to a light blue somewhere in here, and it helps add a little bit of depth to shadows and also a little bit of blue tint to shadows. This is something that I like to use with the yellow color from the sunlight. Again, yellow blends beautifully with pretty much every color on this cube, every color on the spectrum. And likewise, this light blue tint helps add just a little bit of depth and volume to these shadows. You can see as if I take it away there and then add it back, I like this blue. Now, if you want a blood moon map, you might want to change it to red and perhaps make it a little bit darker. If you have a toxic planet, you might want to change it to green, right? This will give your atmosphere lighting different colors, but I generally go for a light blue. I think that's a very realistic tint, and it helps give us some shadows that are a different color than the skylight we used. Now, the third element that we're going to play with here is the sky dome. And again, we have all these colors and all these properties here, and we're going to touch on pretty much every single one of these here. But I think it is important to know the sky dome, like most other items on core, can be scaled. So right here, the scale of the sky dome by default is at 111. If you're building a massive world, or perhaps a space fighting game where people are flying around in ships, you may want to change this scale to something like 3. Now, you'll want to make sure that you come in here and change all of these properties to match, but this will give you a much bigger sky zone, as you can see here, versus the original a little bit tighter there. This can go, as far as I know, it can go as big as you want. I don't think there's really any limit to how big this is, and it just changes the size of that inverted sphere. So looking at the sky dome here, we have all of these smart properties here, and basically 90% of this is just about the clouds. Okay, so if you close all of the cloud stuff here, you can see there's only a few tooltips here and a few different even advanced properties. There's only 2 advanced properties for the sky dome itself. All of the rest of these tabs are all for clouds. Now, we're going to keep these clouds open because we actually want to change the colors of the clouds a little bit. But the first thing we're going to do is change these sky colors right here. I like to start off with the zenith because that's the highest color up in the sky. We're going to set this to a nice purple here. The horizon color, of course, is the color towards this horizon here. And then the haze color is what falls below that horizon. Most of the time, players don't see very much of the haze color in games at all. Essentially, if you have terrain in a game, think about mountains over here on the edge, you won't see very much of this haze color. You might see just little snippets of it peeking through the mountain. So it is important to pay attention to this color, but the horizon color and the zenith color are your main 2 sky colors here. Now for this, if you're following along with the forum post or with me here, I'm going to keep this very close so we end up with this same nice beautiful purple pastel sky. So we change the zenith color to this purple. The horizon color, we're going to go ahead and change this to a nice deep red color. And then the haze color is going to get changed to this nice golden yellow color here. As we can see, these lines in the sky, we can see pretty harsh, drastic changes between the purple, the red, and the yellow down at the bottom. You can change how this looks by shifting these values on the haze fall off and the horizon fall off. For me personally, I like to have my haze fall off somewhere around 12 and my horizon at about 4. And I think this gives a good blend in the sky and takes away some of the harsh cutting lines that we see here. So again, 12 and 4 on those values. And then really quick, as we go through these clouds, I don't like these big puffy clouds in our pastel sky, so we're going to change it to these sparse whips. And then we're going to make sure that the high clouds are also set to wispy strokes. Clouds are really up to you. You can choose any clouds that you want. My personal favorite clouds are the rising curls. But again, for this sky, those don't really make sense. We want something a little bit lighter and a little bit softer, so we're going to go with the sparse whips. Now, as you scroll through here, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different color changing options for clouds. We want to change all of these to be reddish, yellowish, or orangish here. Now, going through here, these colors aren't extremely important. I like to actually leave them variated a little bit so that it's not the same yellow, the same orange, and the same red over and over and over again. I think that gives the clouds just a little bit more volume. But as you can see there, that helps balance our sky a little bit more than just having all these colors set as straight white. The next thing we need to do is go back to the core content tab here. I want to make sure that I don't bring this up too high, that way you guys can see all this. I still have the sky elements here open. Maybe you were messing with some other 3D objects and you moved to something else, but you want to find this sky tab again, click on this, and then we're going to go to components this time. The components are all listed in the main sky tab, but we're going after some of these other things here, so we'll simplify this down. What we're going to add now is moons, planets, planetary rings, and a star dome. That's what fits well with this sky, but nebulas are also treated the same when it comes to all of these components here. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is add another planet, and keep in mind our sun, when we first dragged it in, remember how it was way over here on the horizon? All of these other items are going to work the same way. So if you click and drag a planet into your hierarchy and you're looking over this way, you might be thinking, where's the planet? It's always going to show up over here on the 0 rotation axis. So again, if you moved your sun to the left or the right just a little bit, it might be slightly to the left or slightly to the right, but if your sunlight is at 0, -25, or in my case, -26 and 0, like it is in the tutorial, that planet should show up right underneath that sun. I recommend leaving your sunlight just in this position. Like, we'll bump this up maybe to like -30 here now, just so we get a slightly different look and get that sun a little bit higher up than that cloud there. But leaving this at even if you want, let's say you want to rotate the sun over here or over to the left at some point, I really recommend leaving it at 0 to start off, because then you know where all your planets and moons are going to drop in, right? So the planet here works very similarly to how the sun did. We're going to go ahead and close this tab, that way we can see everything. So changing the Y value, again, will move the planet up into the sky. You can create eclipses like this. If a planet or a moon covers the sun, it will block the light, as you can see. You can also use object rotation scripts to make planets move in the sky, and this can create changing eclipses. But for right now, we're just going to sort of move this planet right over here to the right. We're going to drop him down just a little bit so he's a little bit lower than the sun, and we're going to leave the scale the same. Now, here in the tooltips, you'll see a few different options. You can change the distance of a planet, which brings it closer or pushes it further away. I like to have a good mix here of planets that are close and planets that are far away. So we'll move this one very close, and then the scale also makes the planet smaller, or bigger. Now, remember when I told you a sky dome is an inverted sphere. So if the scale of your planet or moon gets too big, it will cut through that and start to look very weird. I recommend keeping all of these outside of the sky dome. You don't want to start see the edges poking through the sky dome like this. Keep them on the outside. Push them a little bit further away if you need to. If you're going to make the planet the max scale size, right? You can just move the distance out a little bit so the planet stays nice and big, but it gets pushed out just outside of that skybox. Now, you can change the planet appearance. You can leave it like an Earth, cratered Martian landscape, Swiss cheese. A lot of this you won't be able to see as long as you have this box here ticked on, which uses the sun directional light. I always recommend keeping this on. There's really no reason to turn it off. It gives your planets realistic lighting, but we're going to go ahead and rotate this planet around here so the sunlight is actually hitting it. So here we have the Earth-like planet, the cratered Martian landscape, and the Swiss cheese Earth-like planet. So you can play around with these. You can add clouds, no clouds. I like to add clouds to a lot of my planets, and I also like to turn up the brightness so that it's a little bit easier to see the planet off in the sky. Again, these are sort of fine-tuning elements that will all change based on your sky and your game. Maybe you don't want the planets to stand out a whole lot in the background, so you actually make this much dimmer. Really, it's up to you. Now, we have a planet in the sky. The next thing we're going to do is add more planets and a moon. So next thing we'll do is we'll add a moon. Again, the moon is going to come in right underneath our sun over here. The moon is much smaller than a planet, so it's actually going to be a lot tougher to see. And if you start moving the moon up, as you can see here, I'm moving the moon up, and we don't see it until it actually crosses paths with the sun and we start to eclipse it. So this is a good way to find out where your moon is. Again, I'm going to leave it right here just so we can keep in mind where this is as we resize it. Again, I want the brightness on this moon to be turned up a little bit so people can see it. I want the scale to be much larger than that is. And then I'm also going to push the distance just a little bit further out. And then we're going to rotate this moon over here. And there we can see it back behind the planet that we just placed. Now, this is a really important note when you're adding skybox elements. Play around with the distance because you can make planets colliding. You can push them out, right, further and further. I generally don't like to have them colliding like this. I like to have them overlapping. This adds a lot of depth here to the sky, right? If we take away that moon and we just look at this first planet, that looks great. Adding this moon back behind it really adds another layer of depth to your sky and will make players feel like they're in a pretty vast universe compared to if you just leave your sky empty. Now, if you know where these planets and these moons are, I recommend just copy and pasting them into your hierarchy again. So this moon, we'll copy and paste it. It's obviously going to come pasted right over the top of where the other one is. And then we can move this moon around accordingly. I'm going to move one over to this side. I think I want to drop it down a little bit closer to the horizon, make the scale much bigger so that this moon feels like a planet. And then again, we have moon appearances here. We're going to change this one to a blue moon. And it looks like the brightness should get turned down a little bit with that too. But we had some cool blue craters in this moon. I really like the look of the blue moon. I think it's one of the coolest pieces of skybox components. Now, again, we're going to take, maybe instead of duplicating the other planet, we'll just go ahead and use this moon again. Again, I'm going to rotate it just until it's off of this planet. I know we don't want another moon that's this big, so we'll make this one smaller. We'll move the distance in. And perhaps we will put this moon way up high in the sky. That gives players something that's a little bit higher than the sun to look at. And I think that looks great there. Now, the other two things we're going to add to this sky are the star dome. We're going to click and drag this in, and then we're also going to add planetary rings. I'm going to add both of these two in before we edit them, okay? Now, you should see the star dome right away. That's pretty obvious, and you shouldn't really be able to tell where the planetary rings are at all. So the star dome, we're going to change this. We're going to turn the star brightness down to somewhere around 0.8 or 0.75 maybe. We'll go 0.8. We're going to change the color gradient to full spectrum, which gives us multicolored stars in the sky. And I think I like the visibility of the stars turned all the way up to 1. If you want less stars in the sky, you can change this and less stars will appear, but I generally feel like I like this star visibility turned all the way up, so you get the full amount of stars in the sky. Now, the planetary ring, you're actually not going to see, because just like the planets, it ends up laying flat on the horizon. So the first thing we want to do is start messing with these values over here, just until we can see the rings in the sky. So again, normally changing the Y value here, as you can see it, will start to bring something up into the sky. And then rotating it on the Z axis will start to spin it in the sky. Now, I like this planetary ring just the way it looks in our sky. The 70s, there's again different appearances here that you can use: painted desert, 70s beige. I like the 70s beige one for the colors that we have going in this sky, but maybe just to change it up, we will actually use the painted desert one. If you're following along with me exactly, or maybe you've adjusted a few things, you want planets in a few different spaces in your sky, as you can see, this planetary ring is cutting through these planets right here. This looks a little weird. I don't like this. Maybe you do, but I think it looks a little bit unnatural. And as we can see, pretty much no matter how we rotate this on this axis, it seems to be cutting through this planet. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to change this Y value until the rings are a little bit higher up, and that way they don't intersect through that planet. Again, you can fine-tune all of this to match your sky precisely, but as you can see here, the rings sort of cut in front of this moon and in front of these planets without actually intersecting them. As of right now, if we sort of collapse some of these panels a little bit and look around, as of right now, we have a really beautiful sky environment, right? I think this looks fantastic. You can easily change these colors to set all sorts of different moods, but we're still missing a little bit of depth in our environment, and I'm going to show you guys 4 things that I add to every single skybox. These are sort of little tips and tricks, but these are 4 things that I add to every single skybox to help bring worlds to life. Again, I want to make sure as I move this up, I don't want to move it up too far, that way you guys can see the whole panel. There we go. Now, the first thing we're going to look for is environmental fog default. We're going to just drag this into the hierarchy, just like anything else. And again, you'll see this fog right away completely changes the look of our sky. It changes all the colors, and it adds this crazy haze to the map. We don't want it to completely overpower the sky this much. We're going to change this to a nice yellow color to match maybe a little orange, maybe a little yellow, nice little mix there. We're going to change that to match the rest of our sky. That way we can still see those purples. And then we're also going to change the density, the opacity, and some of these fall-offs you can change with as well. I do not ever touch any of the advanced or layered fog properties. I leave those as is, and I accomplish what I want my fog to look like just with the general properties here. I recommend keeping the volumetric fog ticked off. That's up to you. It creates a slightly different look, but I just like the general fog here. And again, we're just going to change a couple of these properties here on the fog to get it to look a little bit better. Okay, we're going to lower the fog density. That way we can still see some of that sky out there. In the tutorial, I had this value at 0.8, right? And then we're also going to lower the opacity to 0.5. Again, a little easier just to type those values in for this. And that environmental fog there is now not too overbearing. We can still see the purple in the sky, we can still see the reds, the oranges, we can still see all of our planets. But again, if we take the fog away, this sky almost looks too saturated. It almost looks a bit cartoony compared to when the fog is there, right? The fog is something that has to be fine-tuned for every game. You might want this density on the fog to be turned way up on your map. You may want the opacity turned all the way up as well. These are things that you might want for an exploration game where you don't want players to be able to see too far in front of them. But again, remember that this fog is going to have profound effects on your sky and all of the other elements in your game as well. I talked about 4 things that I add into every game. The last 3 things are all post-processing effects here, okay? So we have our environmental fog default, and then we're gonna look for 3 post-processing effects. Again, I'm going to drag over the tutorial from the forums right here because this might be a little bit easier. And again, just in case you guys need to find these, post-processing, it's this section right here that we're talking about. We're going to look for the lens flare post-process, the ambient occlusion recolor post-process, and the auto exposure post-process, okay? Those are the 3 things that I add to every single skybox. They're not skybox items, but I group them in with my skies in every single core project that I work on. So again, navigate over here. We're going to look for core content. The sky tab is here, and actually right up above the sky tab is the post-processing tab. And again, we're going to look for a few things. So the first one was lens flare. The second one is ambient occlusion recolor here. And then the third and final one is the auto exposure post-process. All of these items do slightly different things here, and I'm going to tick the last 2 off while we just deal with the lens flare post-process here. But what this lens flare post-process does, it's very important to open up the advanced properties here. What this does is it adds glare when you're looking into the sun, just like you might see in real life if you're a glasses wearer like me, if you're driving and you have a windshield on your car, if you're looking through a camera, any of these things. This is how the sun looks in real life, right? So this is a great addition to pretty much every game. I like to change these values here quite a bit, and I like to have the shape set to circle rainbow. Now in these advanced properties, make sure you open the advanced properties. We're going to set this first number here to 4, and we're going to set the threshold to 2. And now as you see, when you look at the sun and we move the camera around, we'll get this little flare that comes off of the sun. It's got a nice little circle rainbow tint to it. If you're looking away from the sun or far away from it, again, it doesn't come into play. It's only when the sun starts to come into view, and of course it gets more intense when you look straight at the sun. Again, this is just a detail. I think it brings a nice touch out of environments in core, and seeing this little light peeking through trees, peeking over mountains, things like that helps add a whole bunch of depth to a game. Okay, so the next thing here is this ambient occlusion recolor post process. We're going to tick this on so it's visible, and you might be thinking like, okay, nothing's happening, right? I tick this on. I just use this straight out of the box. We're not going to change any properties about this, okay? But we do want to make sure that it's on. Now, nothing will change in the sky, but if we come back to our cube right here, remember this cube is all about showing you how colors will change in your map and how shadows will change in your map as well. If we look at this ambient occlusion, when it's ticked off, this is how the cube looks. When we tick it on and make it visible, it adds a ton of depth and volume to the shadows that are everywhere on the map, okay? This sort of adds more intense shadows at the base and in crevices of items, and lets the shadows that are far away, maybe perhaps the ones casted from the sun up here, it makes those ones feel a little bit less intense, right? So right in here along the border, you can see it really good. Obviously this whole cube is darkening up because the cube is actually made of one large cube and tiny little cubes jutting out of it. So there's all these overhangs. It's a great example of how these shadows change with that ambient occlusion recolor post-processing. The third and final one is the auto exposure post-process. This one, again, most of the time you can use this straight out of the box. You don't really need to change anything about it. And ticking this on again, you'll see it'll change quite a bit about the sky. You may not like how this changes the look of your game. This is something that I like to add to pretty much every game because, again, you can get rid of some low percents and some high percent values. But I use it right out of the box, just how it is. And it sort of helps you balance your entire map and scene. Again, you can see we still have the lens flare up here when we look into the sky. It actually looks a lot more pronounced now that that auto exposure is on, versus if we leave this off, the sky actually looks a little whitewashed out. This auto exposure will really help tone down the fog in your map. Remember this environment fog? It'll really help tone this down. So if you do have a higher fog value, a higher opacity, anything like that, this auto exposure will really help balance it out in your world space. Now everybody, that right there concludes the tutorial portion of this video on how to make your own sky. I generally suggest that you grab all of these items that we just added to the hierarchy, right click, and then you want to find new folder containing these. You want to name this something like basic sky or sky, really anything that you can remember. I normally like to put mine in all caps, that way it stands out in my hierarchy a little bit. But there you have it, there is your sky. Now one tip that I want to leave you guys with, this is kind of ironic because I did not do this at all, but as you're working on your sky, keep in mind that you're also going to have a map, right? Or a world, perhaps, a terrain file. And in the back of your head, you might know that, hey, I think my map is going to be mostly grass, or I think my map is going to be mostly dirt, or whatever it is. Go ahead and change this default floor to actually have that material. That way you can see what your lighting and what your sky is actually doing to that material. Again, we sort of have like a nice sunset pastel sky here with some post-processing effects. You may not want post-processing effects like this in your game. That may sort of interfere with gameplay, but go ahead and apply some sort of material. Again, maybe you know, well, it's going to be mostly dirt, or maybe you know that a lot of your map is going to be granite or cliffside. Again, this granite is actually a generally white grayish tone, but as you can see here, it has sort of a blue greenish tint to it because of the yellow and blue tints that we added to our skylights and skylights and sunlights, right? These two colors here have sort of changed this granite material. Maybe we know, hey, we don't want this granite to come across blue, so we actually need to change this tint back to white, and we need to change the light color from the sun back to white. And boom, just like that, this granite looks gray again. These are choices that are all up to you, but again, putting some sort of material, generally I pick grass because I have grass in generally every game that I make in some form or another, but I generally leave the grass here on this default floor. That way you get some idea of how your world is actually going to look with your sky. And don't forget, I went ahead and changed the view back to default here. You know, your properties window might be down here. Community content is generally always here. But if you search for Skyboxes in community content, you will find my Skybox pack right here, the first one. Import this into your project and go ahead and go peeking through it. See how these skies work for you. This is another one that I like to touch on, the moonlit night one, because this one actually uses a moon as the light source. As you can see, we have no sun in this map. It's nighttime. We have I think 3 or 4 different star domes, so there's lots of stars in the sky. But this moon up here is actually acting as our source of light, casting shadows onto the cube and beyond. So these are all things that you can play with to achieve basically any sky that you want. Again, there are all sorts of skies here for you to use and to play around with and to start with. Pretty much any color you could dream of, any style you could dream of, they are here and ready for you to use, check out, and play with in games. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was helpful for you. Don't forget there's a forum post if you'd like to read through it instead of watching this video, or if you'd like to go get some of the specific values that I used, those are available there. If you guys have any suggestions for the next tutorials, please leave those in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Peace.